Good morning, everyone. How are you all today? I hope everyone is doing well. Good morning. Good morning. Isamar is in Texas. That's where I am as well. Christina in South Carolina. Danielle in Florida. Good morning to all of you. Hi, Carrie Stanford and Anna. Adagisa passed her test the first try. Congratulations. And I always mispronounce your name, so I apologize because I think I just mispronounced it again. I am so proud of you. That is wonderful news. Congratulations on passing your exam. Good morning, Mona in Texas. How are you today? And Makisha in Michigan. Hi, Anna Jean and Nia in North Carolina. Maria Perez in Apple Valley, California. And there's Jacques in Atlanta and Jeffrey in Pennsylvania. Oh my goodness, California, Southern California. Well, we have all of the United States represented here today. Today, our webinar is on federal fair housing laws. This will be on your licensing exam. And this is also extremely applicable to information that you must know as you are practicing real estate. So remember that these are going to be things that you have to know as you begin your real estate career and all the way through it as well. Get your pen and paper ready. We are going to do our vocabulary list by topic. If you are joining us for the first time today, welcome to you. We're so glad to have you here. You will see in all of my webinars that I do that I have a suitcase of information, remembering things by a topic, storing it in that suitcase, categorizing the information makes it much easier for you to recall it on the exam. So if you are joining us for the first time today, implement this method of learning from the very beginning and it will be quite helpful to you. So does everybody have their pen and paper ready so you can make your vocabulary list as we go along? Another thing I want to say about the fair housing part, HUD sends out shoppers. They pose as clients to see if you are following the rules. So I pretend that every single one of my clients are someone from HUD. So I can always remember to follow every single rule about the fair housing laws. The first thing we're going to talk about is HUD's definition of the fair housing. And HUD stands for Housing and Urban Development, and they are the ones who oversee the Fair Housing Act. Their definition says that this protects people from discrimination when they are renting or buying a home, getting a mortgage, seeking housing assistance, or engaging in other housing-related activities. To sum that up, it's saying anybody who's purchasing or leasing a property, that everybody is given the same opportunity to do so, that we cannot discriminate against anyone. Hello, Beatrice. How are you today? Sanjita passed the state exam. Congratulations. As far as the Fair Housing Act, declares a national policy of fair housing throughout the United States. The law makes illegal any discrimination in the sale, lease, or rental of housing, or making housing otherwise unavailable because of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin. So on my vocabulary list, I'm going to write down the Fair Housing Act. I need to know what that is. To make it easy for you to remember those protected classes, I like to use the acronym FRESH CORN. FRESH CORN, these are all of the protected classes. Familial status. Familial status is going to be if there are children under the age of 18 living with a parent or a legal guardian. It also applies to pregnant women. I'm going to go ahead and put that on my vocabulary list too. I need to know what that is. race. There is nothing for E. The S is for sex. The H is for handicap. The C is for color. The O is nothing there. The R is for religion. The N is for national origin. You can see that we're left with the E and the O. If you do not violate the fair housing laws, you are providing equal opportunities. If you do violate the fair housing laws, you might need your errors and omissions insurance, which is just a professional type insurance in case somebody messes up. So try to remember the protected classes from the acronym FRESH CORN. I'm going to go ahead and just put fresh corn on my vocabulary list as well, so that I remember I need to know what all those things mean. Now, I also included familial status on its own just because a lot of times people are like, well, what does that mean? The others are very self-explanatory. Okay, does everybody have all that down? You might want to take a picture of that if you haven't already done so. You know, you can go back to these webinars and watch them over and over again. And I would definitely take a picture of this slide because of the fact that it's a very easy way for you to remember those protected classes. I'm reading your chat. Now, if you have taken your exam more than one time, I do not want you to feel badly about that. It is not you. It is just a very difficult to interpret exam, not you at all. It has no bearing on how smart you are, nor how well you will do in real estate. It can get a little discouraging if you've taken it more than once. But I don't want you to be discouraged. It's not you, it's the test. So I want you to keep a very positive outlook on this and know that you are going to pass the test. You just have to outsmart the test, basically. It's a very much a numbers thing, very analytical approach to passing it. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, you need to remember that date. This was what prohibited all racial discrimination in the sale or rental of property. So I'm going to put that on my vocabulary list, the Civil Rights Act of 1866. So remember, that was the first one that talked about fair housing, and that prohibited the racial discrimination in the sale or rental of property. Then we had the Civil Rights Act of 1968. This is also Title 8 of the Act is known as the Fair Housing Act of 1968. So I'm going to go ahead and put the Fair Housing Act of 1968 on my vocabulary list. And this one went in, and remember the first one was racial discrimination. They had said that that's prohibited. They went in on the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and they added the other things. They expanded on previous acts that prohibited discrimination, and they added, so concerning the sale or rental and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, handicap, and family status. That means the same thing as familial status. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 has been amended several times. The most recent amendment that was made was when President Biden took office, and he went in, and one of the first things he did was he amended and included the LGBTQ community. They were not one of the protected classes, which is very surprising. He went in and he fixed that. So they are now a protected class. Now, is that reflected on your exam yet? I have not had a student come back and give me any kind of indication that that's changed on the test yet. It takes a while for them to update the test. So I don't think they have updated the test to include that amendment. You should be able to tell from the way the questions are worded, but I want you to go ahead and know that information because they could get that test amended at any time, and they don't usually send us a message and say, hey, we got that done, which I really wish they would. So that was the most recent amendment that was made, was when President Biden went in and added the LGBTQ community. I'm just checking your chat. Yeah, Christine Robinson saying, don't wait a long time between testing. Yeah, I so agree with you. If somebody does not pass the test, then you want to go in and you want to evaluate what part did you not do well on, and really concentrate your studying on that and go take it again as soon as possible. Yeah. Oh, stool enhancer. Let me go back to fresh corn. You want to, yes. I think you were asking a question on that. So let me show that slide again, because some of you may not have gotten all that written down. Okay. In this webinar, I included examples that are directly from HUD that make it easy for you to learn from. To me, it's much easier to learn a lot of times if you have real life experiences that you can relate it to. So here's an issue of discrimination that occurred. This is religious discrimination. So Jane is a Muslim woman and she wears a hijab. She walked into a leasing office for a large apartment building because she saw a sign in the building's window advertising several units available. She introduced herself to the leasing officer, and immediately that leasing officer says, "We don't have any units available." Jane asked to be put on a waiting list, but nobody ever called her. She filed a complaint with HUD because she suspects the leasing officer does not want to rent to her because she's Muslim. HUD investigates this, and it turns out that Jane is right. Other employees of the building give HUD information that substantiates Jane's claim of religious discrimination. So there's you an example of religious discrimination. Jane, the Muslim woman, who was discriminated against because of that. That's not okay. We all have the same equal opportunity to buy or lease the property, and everybody is to be treated equally. So that did not happen, and so that person who discriminated against her probably faces a large fine. The fines are pretty sizable. Let's talk about somebody with a disability. HUD defines the person with a disability as an individual with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, an individual with a record of such impairment, or an individual who is regarded as having such an impairment. Some physical or mental impairment examples, this is not all of them, but a few: orthopedic, visual, speech and hearing impairments, cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, HIV, developmental disabilities, mental illness, drug addiction, and alcoholism. So does everybody have a list there of the physical or mental impairments? And again, this is not all of them. Now, there is a very confusing part on the exam, and I want to make sure you're okay with this and you get this correct. This is extremely confusing. You see on there that drug addiction and alcoholism are included. So we can't discriminate against somebody who has a drug addiction or alcoholism problem. What they mean by that is somebody who is seeking help for that, that's not actively engaged in drug addiction or alcoholism. Because if you did have somebody who was actively using drugs or alcohol on a regular basis, and they were posing a threat to society where it was unsafe, then even though they're listed on here as a disability, let's say they were leasing an apartment, you would not have to rent to them. Does everybody see the distinction on that? So drug addiction and alcoholism included as disabilities, but think of it more like somebody who is recovering from that. They have that under control. If you get a question and it says they are actively engaged in using drugs or alcohol to where they are posing an unsafe situation for others, then they are not required to be leased to, or usually that's going to be like in an apartment complex or something like that. Everybody okay on the distinction on that? I get a lot of questions when I'm tutoring. Students very confused on that. So I want to make sure you're all okay on that. I'm going to watch the chat to make sure you see the distinction on that. Everybody okay? The chat has a little bit of a delay coming to me, so I'm not seeing anything, so I'm guessing you're all okay on that. Another example. Yeah, Jessica, I've got a slide that's going to talk about service animals here in just a moment. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Everybody good? Okay, good. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure you had a distinction on that because I get so many questions of people being confused on that. Another example from HUD. John is a person with a disability who uses a wheelchair. And he goes to look at a condominium that he's hoping to purchase. It's in a multi-story building. When he arrives, he finds that there are no accessible parking spaces in the building's parking lot. He tries to enter the unit, but his wheelchair can barely fit through the door, and he bangs his arms on the way in. Inside the unit, the thermostat and light switches are all too high for him to reach. The building has a fitness room, but he cannot look at it because the only way to get to the fitness room is to go up the steps. John files a complaint with HUD because failing to comply with accessibility requirements is a form of disability discrimination. So he couldn't park his car close, so it was easy for him. His wheelchair wouldn't go through the door, the thermostat, the light switches. They were just totally out of compliance as far as making that where it was accessible to somebody with his type of disability. Yeah, Rulasha, I'm going to be talking about blockbusting here shortly. Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you're enjoying this webinar. I'm so glad. I love to teach. I have the best job of all, getting to teach all of you amazing students. Familial status. So we already added that to our vocabulary list. So we have that on our vocabulary list. So if there's a child under the age of 18 living with a parent or legal guardian, that's familial status. It also applies to pregnant women. Now, the exceptions to familial status are going to be a 55 and up community. So in a 55 and up community, they have an 80-20 rule. 80% of the people have somebody who lives there who's 55 or up. The other 20% could be any other age. The other exception to familial status are the 62 and up communities with a 100% rule. They all have to have one person who's leasing or owning that is 62 or up. So your two exceptions to familial status, 55 and up communities and 62 and up communities. I normally wouldn't call these vocabulary words, but I want you to go ahead and list that on your list. 55 and up communities, just so you go back and take a look at that. And the 62 and up communities. And notate next to that that those are the exceptions to when you're advertising regarding familial status. Yeah. Also, you might make a note, they refer to that as HOPA. That's the Housing for Older Persons Act, HOPA. Somebody saw them reference HOPA on the licensing exam the other day. I've only had one student who saw that, and they came back and they were like, we have no idea what this even means. So jot down that these exceptions to familial status, the 55 and up communities, the 62 and up communities, these are all mentioned on HUD's website, hud.gov, and they're under the category of HOPA, Housing for Older Persons Act. Another example for you. Another example would be that John has 3 teenage children, and John's building has a patio with picnic tables. One day, John's children decide to have lunch there with some of their friends. The next day, John receives a notice from the Homeowners Association informing him the building rules say that the patio is for adult use only, and he needs to make sure his children don't violate the building rules. John files a complaint with HUD because building rules that discriminate against children are a form of familial status discrimination. Now, the only way this would not have been discrimination if it had been a 55 and up community with the 80-20 rule, or a 62 and up community with the 100% rule as far as those ages. So again, those are structured under what we call HOPA, and this is what allows them to have those rules and also to advertise as 55 or 62 and up communities and not violate the familial status rules. Relasha says female seeking female to share in living expenses. Okay, I think I may have a slide on this. I can't remember. But you cannot specify a certain gender unless there are shared living spaces. So if it says female seeking female to share in living expenses, then that's fine. That's not discriminatory because they have shared living spaces, or male seeking male, or however they have that. Yeah. Now, if it was not a shared living space, then that is not allowed. But it is the fact that it is a shared living space that they can seek a certain gender. Yeah. And it would be male seeking male roommate, female seeking male, or female seeking female roommate. So they can specify if they have a shared living space. So female seeking female, male seeking male, whatever it might be. Yeah, they love to put that on the test, Lauren. That's a fairly common question, and a lot of people miss it. So make sure that you all have that. Cindy Swain says it's on her test as well. Everybody okay on that? That the only reason you can reference gender is because it's shared living spaces. Okay. Now, one of you asked about steering and blockbusting a moment ago, and I'm going to put steering on my vocabulary list. Steering is taking someone to or away from an area based on a protected class. So I think about getting in the car and I'm steering my car to an area or away from an area based on one of those protected classes. So this helps you understand it. We have John, who's an Asian man, and he meets with his real estate broker because he wants to purchase a property for his family. When John tells the broker, this is the neighborhood I'm interested in, the broker asks John if he is sure his family will feel comfortable there. The broker tells John that she has a wonderful listing in another neighborhood where there are more people like them. When the broker takes John to see the house, John notices that the residents of the neighborhood appear to be mostly Asian. John files a complaint with HUD, as he should. That is not okay for that broker to have done that, because steering someone to a certain neighborhood because of his race is a form of race discrimination. So this is an example of steering right here. Do you see how the broker steered him, got him in the car, drove him, steered her car to an area where she told him there are more people like him? So I imagine that broker probably got a pretty good fine for doing that. We simply can't do that. Now, the way that you avoid doing something like this is to know the rules, also to educate your buyers. Let them know what all of this means as well. Tell your buyers what I can base a search on, what I can't base a search on. So they're educated and they know from the very beginning. Yeah, back to the definition of steering. There you go. Taking somebody to or away from an area based on a protected class. Madison says, can you explain HUD? They're a governmental agency who oversee a lot of different things, FHA loans, fair housing. So they're just a governmental agency who regulate things. All right, I'm just double checking your chat to make sure you're all doing okay. Everybody okay on steering? I get a lot of students who are confused on this, so always just think about being in the car and steering it. That is what helps me remember. Now, let me also go over this article that was in National Association of Realtors. We should not be seeing licensees steering. We're all educated on this regularly. Before you even have a license, we're educating you on this. But look how high this statistic is, and this should not be. An article in National Association of Realtors, this was dated July 10th of 2020, so it was last year, says that despite being illegal under the Fair Housing Act, A recent investigation conducted by the newspaper Newsday has shown that steering continues to be pervasive. Newsday had real estate agents show properties to one white tester and one minority tester, either African American, Hispanic, or Asian, with similar housing needs and financial capabilities. The investigation revealed that in 24% of cases, the real estate agents directed the white tester into differing communities from the minority testers, suggesting evidence of steering. That's nearly a fourth of their study. That should not be. Those numbers are way too high. This should not be occurring. So kind of interesting to see how common it still is. I think sometimes licensees are just simply not educated, or they're just not thinking through things. Again, that client very well may be somebody from HUD who's a shopper. They're trying to see if you are following fair housing laws. They pose as a client. Some of them are good actors and actresses. They love to go to the apartment buildings. So if any of you are working in an apartment, property management, something like that, put on here on chat if you've ever been shopped before. Isamar Vargas says, Cynthia, how do we study for the state part of the exam? Isamar, I think I saw a moment ago, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're in Texas. If you will email me, Cynthia@prepagent.com, I am in Texas, so I will tell you exactly how to do that. But email me directly, Cynthia@prepagent.com. Yeah, Jessica said, I had one happen to me. Did you get shocked, Jessica? Pao Gonzalez, HUD is just a governmental agency, Housing and Urban Development. They just oversee like FHA loans. Oh, they do a lot of different things. They oversee fair housing. Jessica, did you know that you were being shocked? Jessica was shocked. Did you have any idea that it was somebody from HUD, or were they good actors and actresses, or could you kind of tell? Tara Henry says, HUD loves to call and pretend to be a prospector. Yes, they do. And this is why we have to be on high alert all the time. Know the rule on it and just pretend your client is from HUD so you're following all the rules. Tara Henry says, been shocked many times. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Steering is easy. People get that in blockbusting. Jessica said she felt something was off but had no idea it was HUD. Yeah. All right. Now, blockbusting. People get steering and blockbusting confused. They're totally different. So blockbusting is also known as panic peddling, maybe panic selling. You may see it called that as well. That's inducing property owners to sell now while values are still high as another race or class might be moving in. So totally illegal, not okay. Absolutely not okay to do. So remember, steering, taking somebody to or away from an area based on a protected class. Blockbusting, also, you're making somebody panic. Sell now while values are still high. Everybody okay with the distinction? Hello, Glory. How are you? And no, Rachel, they do not tell you they are from HUD. No, they don't. Sometimes they'll give a little clue. But some of them are outstanding actors and actresses, and that's why you just have to pretend all the time that's who your client is. Then you'll follow all the rules. And I think sometimes agents don't mean to not follow the rules. They just were never educated on them, or they just got complacent, and I don't know. But you always have to follow all the rules. Everybody good on the difference in steering and blockbusting? Add blockbusting to your list. Yeah, Jennifer Blakely says, no, they don't, Rachel. That's right. Yeah. They do not identify who they are, except just pretending they're a client. Reasonable accommodation. One of you asked about this earlier. So for reasonable accommodation, let's say that you have a tenant in a wheelchair and they need a ramp built to that property. Maybe it's an apartment complex. Let's use that for an example. So the apartment complex has to allow them that ramp to the apartment because they're in a wheelchair. They must have that. That's a reasonable accommodation for them to ask for. The apartment complex can make them pay for the ramp, and they can also request that they remove it as well. Example number 2, service animal in an apartment. So If it is a no pets allowed and it is a service animal, then the apartment complex does have to allow the service animal. They cannot charge a pet deposit or pet rent. If the dog destroys the apartment, yes, they can charge for that before you move out. Now, if they cannot see your disability, and there are many disabilities that you can't see. We have a friend that has a daughter and she has seizures. And her service animal is there for her seizures. Whenever she is about to have a seizure, the dog senses that and it goes and gets her medicine and takes it to her mother. Isn't that incredibly amazing? And her mom can go ahead and help her so that she doesn't have as severe of a seizure. These service animals do phenomenal things to help. But if she's not having a seizure, you would never know that she had seizures. So if that were the case, the apartment complex can ask for a reasonable accommodation letter that she is allowed to have that service animal. And so I have you a sample letter right there. This is on HUD's website. I always put you a reference to the website in case you want to go back and research more on your own. I'm a huge researcher, so I figure you might be as well. So you can always go back and take a look. Now, the notice on there, the doctor just says that she is, eligible to have a service animal. She meets the requirements. They can't go in and say, okay, tell us what your disability is. That gets into all kinds of other confidentiality issues. Diana says, have you bought your dog yet? Yes, she comes home October 1st. We were naming her Hattie Grace, but now we've changed her name to Ella Grace. She is the cutest little red poodle you have ever seen. She has one white foot and she's red. She has one white foot and she has white under her chin. So whenever she comes home, I'll post pictures on our webinar so you can see her. Thank you for asking about her, Diana. We are counting down. Jacques Parker says, what suitcase does this go under? Practice of real estate, Jacques. Practice of real estate. Yeah, fair housing's under practice of real estate. Yes, I will, Cindy. I will put a picture of her. She is the cutest thing I've ever seen. Oh my goodness. We're all about this little dog. She's so cute. Now, another example from HUD. We have Jane, and she has a developmental disability, and it affects her capacity to manage her own finances. Jane tells her building manager that her mother will be paying her rent for this reason and asks if all notices relating to her rent can be sent to her mother. The building manager tells Jane the management company has a policy of only sending notices to residents, no exceptions. Several months later, Jane receives an eviction notice because her mother had not known that Jane's rent had been increased. Jane files a complaint with HUD because denying a reasonable accommodation is a form of disability discrimination. So they were supposed to give her reasonable accommodations by forwarding that to her mother. They did not do that. I'm reading your chat. Yes. Yeah, I'll definitely post a picture of Miss Ella Grace. Yes, most definitely. In fact, I'll try to remember. Stu will be with you tomorrow. I have to teach a continuing education class tomorrow, so he'll be with you here tomorrow. That's usually my normal day. For webinars is Tuesday, so I'll try to remember next week at the webinar to put a picture of her so you can all see it. Let's not do the fine part because I don't think they're going to ask you that. Now, how long do you have to file a fair housing complaint? You have to file your complaint within 1 year of the last date of the alleged discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. Other civil rights authorities allow for complaints to be filed after 1 year for good cause, but the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity recommends filing as soon as possible. So remember, you must file your complaint within 1 year of the last date of the alleged discrimination. Yeah. Blessed by God has a great question here. What happens if the client steers you? They can't, because you are the expert. If they try to steer you, you have to know the rule and the law. And my response to somebody, if somebody were to say, okay, take me to an Asian community or a Caucasian neighborhood or whatever it might be, my response is going to be, I'm sorry, I can't base my search on that. That is something we're not allowed to do under the Fair Housing. What I'll need from you is to give me a zip code or a subdivision name, or draw me a square or a rectangle of where it is that you would want to live. So that's how you would take care of any kind of question like that. You're the teacher. You have to teach your clients. Yeah. Also, remember that state and local laws can be a little bit different. Like in most areas, the LGBTQ community have been in the state and local laws for a very long time. It was the federal law that they weren't on. And of course, that can vary a little from state to state. So there are always going to be some state and local laws as well. JR, I don't know where you got that 6 months or 180 days. It's 1 year. You may have had something state, JR, on that, where you were getting those numbers from. Or you possibly could have had something out of date that you were looking at. I know I was researching something for somebody on the do not call, and she's like, why do I have all these different fines? And we went in and took a look. I did a timeline on it, and since 2016, the fine had gone up numerous times. So some of the materials had not been updated in their school materials. So sometimes that can be the case. Think back, JR, as to where you might have seen that, and email me, Cynthia@prepagent.com, so we can figure out why you were thinking that. It may have gone back to your state and email. All right. The Americans with Disabilities Act, if you'll put that on your list. This Title 3 of the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against persons with disabilities in places of public accommodations and commercial facilities. So this would be why you have to have so many handicap parking places. This would be why you have to have the doors that are wider so a wheelchair could go in if you were going to the mall or some type of public type accommodation. Anna, if you emailed me, I did not respond back. I tried to respond back. Every once in a while, there is an email, because I get a lot of emails that gets by me that if I get super busy, if that were to ever happen, just email it to me again. Sometimes they don't come through to me as well. So that could be, so just email it to me again. So I'll make sure to be watching for it. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. This is just making sure that anybody who's applying for credit, that they use the same criteria for every single person for them to be able to get credit. They're going to evaluate everything exactly the same. Now, on the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, I want you to pay close attention to something, and I included this slide for this very reason. If you look there, there's the protected classes under that. Race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, or because all or part of the applicant's income derives from any public assistance program. Note that on that, that's a little different than fresh corn. So remember, they've added marital status. You didn't have that in fresh corn. They've added age, and then because all or part of the applicant's income derives from any public assistance program, they've added that as well. So that's a really great question for them to put on your exam, and we spend so much time learning all the protected classes with fresh corn that this is easy to miss, so make certain that you know all of this. Daniel, I'm going to take any kind of protected class out of my search when I'm looking for a buyer of property. So I'm going to take anything that has to do with race, any of the protected classes. I can base my search on zip codes, on subdivision names. Draw me a square, draw me a rectangle of where you want to live, but I'm not going to include any of the protected classes in my search. Okay, so let's add Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Okay, so let's go over our vocabulary list. Here's our vocabulary list for today. We had the Fair Housing Act, familial status, fresh corn, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Fair Housing Act of 1968. I wanted you to know the 55 and up communities and the 62 and up communities. And remember, that was from HOPA, Housing for Older Persons Act. That's all under HUD as well. Steering, block busting, reasonable accommodations, Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Equal Credit Opportunities. Does everybody have their vocabulary list? Rachel, you can go back in and you can watch these webinars over and over again. You just scroll down to previous webinars and type in, on this one it's called Fair Housing. You just type that in and you'll see the list of them. Always watch my most recent one, because if there's been a law change or a rule change, I will include it there. Yeah. And then every day of the week, you know, we have a live webinar that we're doing as well. But you can go back to these and watch them over and over again. And mine are always on PowerPoint, so you can always go in and take notes that way. Well, I think we learned a whole lot today. Everything that we talked about, you can expect to see on your test. I'm not ever going to bring anything to you that I don't think will be on your test. I don't want to waste your time. And I want you to make sure that the part that you're learning is relevant to what you need to know, because it's so much information. The other thing I want you to remember today, every single thing I have taught you today, you need to know for your real estate career. It will be quite helpful to you. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day. If you liked this webinar today, it always means a lot to me if you'll click the thumbs up button. That means a whole lot to me. I count it quite an honor to teach all of you. I will see you next week, and Stu again will be here with you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.